nothing is off the table. We take more listener calls, spark more honest conversations, and challenge more assumptions than any talk station in Southern California. Because good ideas matter more than ideology. KBLA Talk 1580, your station, your voice, your city. Listen live at KBLA 1580 AM on our free KBLA 1580 app or on our website at KBLA1580.com.
Unapologetically progressive.
The Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. 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 Come on and talk with me. Come on and listen to me. Come on and talk with me. Come on and listen to me. KBLA Talk 1580. Download the app.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. We are now in the World House with Johnny Mack on Thought Provoking Thursdays. Dr. Mack is a social entrepreneur, a scholar practitioner with an expertise in subject areas of peace, conflict, social change, and movements. His research includes extensive study of Martin Luther King Jr.'s logic of nonviolence and the U.S. Civil Rights Movement. He explicates Dr. King's logic of nonviolence using Dr. King's call to restructure the social edifice and particularly its triple evils of poverty, racism, and militarism with a revolution of values that is effected through peaceable power. Johnny, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show and the world. Johnny, how are you?
I'm doing well, Jesse. How are you? Great to be here.
It's always a pleasure, Johnny. We're in the World House, and so there's some places in the world that in this hour we need to travel. And maybe in a later segment, I want to raise this question on the question of Dr. King, whether or not today's marches and protests are effective. Let's save that for the end of the show. Johnny, the president of the United States is saber rattling in Cuba. He has now indicted the former president of Cuba, Raul Castro. African Americans have a long history of working with Cuban leadership, including the late Fidel Castro, on the liberation struggles, not only in sub-Saharan Africa. In fact, one could argue there would be no free Mandela but for the support that Cuba provided to the people of Angola and Namibia and in these countries with Samora Machel and others in the struggle for their freedom and revolution against colonialism. Can you help our leaders with how significant it is for the U.S. to intervene into the affairs of Cuba the ways in which it has at this hour?
Well, it's obviously very significant, Jesse. As you've indicated, Cuba has a very significant Afro population, or population of African descent, some 10 to 55%, depending upon how we define African descent, including mestizo or mulatto individuals who have African blood. Particularly if we follow, Jesse, that one drop rule. The point is, it's not just Cuba. It is a panoply of countries throughout the Caribbean and South America, whether it's Brazil, Colombia, Guyana. All of these countries in the Caribbean. Remember, we have Haiti and what happened in Venezuela. But these countries represent significant resources, whether they are minerals or populations or strategic positions. And the goal of this administration is to control completely, wholly, the entire Western Hemisphere. This is part of the restructuring and reordering of the global structure. And that's really what's happening here, Jesse.
I think no truer words have been spoken. I mean, at the same time that the U.S. is making this, if you will, empire-based move across the Caribbean and South America, we're reflective of the great revolutionaries like Fidel Castro and Che Guevara and Aristide when he was a revolutionary, and some of the fighters that have lost their lives in the struggle against colonialism. And in one fell swoop, an American election, towards our previous guest's point, midterms effing matter, an American election with the wrong person at the helm can literally begin a neo-colonialist process that is presently underway in the Western Hemisphere. Johnny, we have about 3 minutes before we come forward. American expansionism, however, is also coupled with Donald Trump's for American isolationism that is making all American things great, or MAGA, if you will, locking our borders while insisting at the same time for access to these critical minerals, critical reserves. But it's not clear that people of color in the Caribbean or people of color in South America are going to be the beneficiaries of the very minerals that are underneath their feet at this juncture. And it seems to me that at some point in time, when America can no longer sustain its empire, we're looking at a series of constant revolutions that will be taking place quite possibly for many decades to come. Johnny?
You mentioned American expansionism versus isolationism. I want to push back just slightly on that. Clearly, the current administration has talked a great deal about American isolationism, America first in that regard. I'm not so sure that the expansionism is so much about America as it is about certain Americans.
Wow.
And that the expansion does not include, as many other things do not include, certain groups and populations in this country, as they are marginalized in so many different ways. So I'm not so sure that it's correct to characterize the expansion as a expansion of all of America, but only, I would argue, certain elements of and groups in these United States of America.
I think that's accurate. I think that I may have overstated the case. When I say expansionism, I'm thinking when Trump offers the people of Greenland an opportunity to be a state with 2 senators, and he has not made the offer yet, but should there be an American intervention into Cuba, there is talk in certain circles about the possibility of Cuba becoming the 51st state of the United States. It's just on and on and on. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on KBLA Talk 1580. We are talking about the expansion of the American empire. More when we come back and come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
After nearly 20 years in Congress, he knows how to get at the issues that matter the most to you. Every day, he takes a deep dive into politics, social justice, and the stories that shape our community. This is where prominent people unpack perplexing problems. Unfiltered, unapologetic, unmissable. You're inside the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on KBLA Talk 1580.
If you have unfiled taxes or are in debt to the IRS, this is important news. Did you know the IRS has programs specifically designed to help people struggling with tax debt? Powerful tax assistance programs that can save you thousands if you qualify. No one knows these programs better than the experts at Optima Tax Relief, America's most trusted tax resolution firm. A-rated by the Better Business Bureau, their award-winning tax attorneys and licensed professionals have resolved over $3 billion of tax debt for their clients. One call to Optima can start the process, helping to put an end to your worries about wage garnishment, asset seizure, and other aggressive IRS actions. Find the best options to solve your tax problems. Call the experts at Optima Tax Relief today for a free consultation.
Call 800-919-9077. 800-919-9077. 800-919-9077.
Optima Tax Relief.
Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Lena Bloom for the Bail Project.
Imagine you're stuck in a jail cell and you can't afford bail, and someone offers you a way out. Just plead guilty, and you can go home and kiss your kids goodnight. What do you do? What thousands have. You plead guilty whether you are or not. Cash bail makes poverty a crime. That's why the Bail Project helps those who can't afford it while fighting to end cash bail. Because freedom should be free.
Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, host of The Voice of Reason, weeknights at 7 p.m. here on KBLA Talk 1580, with a personal invitation for you to join me and Insight.me as we present The Healing Box, live at Inglewood's world-famous Miracle Theater, Saturday evening, May 23rd at 7 p.m. Look, I understand your attachment style has been running your life like a rogue algorithm, and nobody has had the courage to press pause. Until now, Dr. Pakoya McCall and yours truly are curating a night where clinicians, spiritualists, and an all-star panel of Black woman healers like Dr. Shalonda Sunshine Crawford, Dr. Jashana Johnson, and spiritualist Precious McGill will join some amazing spoken word artists and the legendary comedian Louis Dix to diagnose, disrupt, and heal your relational wreckage in real time. Listen, bring your trauma. As a matter of fact, bring your baby mama. No, bring your testimony. And if you're still texting your ex at 2 a.m., baby, you're not just invited, you're the target demo. Tickets are moving fast, so grab yours at themiracleinglewood.com before your dating history gets flagged as a pre-existing condition. That's themiracleinglewood.com. We'll see you there Saturday, May 23rd at 7 p.m.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
The Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. 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 King of all equality, drop the beat. Come on and talk with me. Come on and listen to me. Come on and talk with me. Come on and listen to me. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. We're in the World House with Dr. Johnny Mack on Thought Provoking Thursday. Dr. Mack's seminal work, After Confrontation, Then What?, challenges the putative logic of nonviolent social change theory and practice. Particularly, he rearticulates nonviolence beyond the traditional understanding of nonviolent struggle as principally nonviolent resistance. Dr. Mack, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show and your show, The World House.
Great to be here.
Dr. Mack, let me ask you this question. If I can pivot for a moment to what seems to be Trump's failed talks in Iran. In your opinion, that NATO might possibly force the reopening of the Hormuz Strait because of the world economy and what its consequences and ramifications could be for the poor in Africa, in South America, in Cuba, a country that is struggling without something as basic as the energy needs to have lights on at night, laying the foundation for the kind of corruption that only Donald Trump can bring to the people of Cuba at this hour?
If I understand your question, Jesse, correctly, it is a question of priority. That is, will NATO be more concerned about what is happening in the Strait than what is happening in the Caribbean, and particularly relative to Cuba? Have I understood your question correctly?
Yes, sir, you do.
Well, indeed. You know, Jesse, I think you are right, or at least implied in your question. There is, and will continue to be, in my judgment, much more concerned about the impact of what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz versus the impact of what is happening relative to the emerging crisis between Cuba and the United States. Not justifiably so. The impact of shutting down that strait or controlling who goes in and who comes out of that strait is profound with respect to the entire globe, virtually affecting the entire globe. And so there's good reason in my judgment for that. But I'm not sure that prioritizing here is the issue. All of these issues in terms of global crises are significant. They're important. They impact the lives of ordinary people and put into question the fundamental dignity and worth of every global citizen. That's the issue here, it seems to me.
Johnny, let me ask you this question. What would Dr. King say, or what would he do in light of the circumstances that we have been presented with at this hour?
If we stick with both of the crises, there are many others, of course. What's happening again, as we often comment on, between Russia and Ukraine, or the many crises in Africa right now, particularly in East Africa and Somalia, in South Sudan, etc. What would King say is your question. We can't be certain ever exactly what he would say, but we can certainly extrapolate from where he left off. And that is that he saw in his prescient way these crises unfolding, and we've talked about that in his speech on Vietnam, Jesse. And we should never forget. We should always keep that speech in front of us as we deal with the crises like those that we face today, Jesse. King, again, is so prescient. He is so in tune with the dominance and the control of the greed, the outright greed of largely the Western world, and particularly, as King pointed out, his own nation, the United States. And he gives us a model of what we must do to create a just and peaceful world. And so, given the crises as we see them today, one only need read Beyond Vietnam, or A Time to Break Silence, as it is also known, to really understand how King would view these crises today.
Johnny, let me ask you this question, because I know that we oftentimes on our programs, but also in our dialogue, we wear Dr. King out. I'm wondering, when Dr. King referred to the Mahatma, to Gandhi, as inevitable, and if he didn't come, we would have to create our own version of Mohandas K. Gandhi. And if Jesus didn't come back, we would have to create our own version of Mohandas K. Gandhi, because the world needs at this hour a sensible reflection upon who we are as human beings, beyond nationalism, beyond our own race, beyond our own ethnicity, calling us to a higher purpose as people. Dr. King kind of hung around this idea of mutuality and mutual existence. And I'm wondering at this hour, in the absence of any of the great philosophers or even the Lord himself, what is it that we have to create in terms of the spirit energy to sharpen the pencil on the question of our common humanity? Johnny?
Yes, Jesse, it is the question. And the operative word is the pronoun we. What do we have to do? And Jesse, it is us. It is all of us waiting for a Messiah, waiting for a king or a Gandhi, may find us waiting until it's too late. Within each and every one of us, I believe, and I think King would agree, is that very spirit that you call forth in your question. You and Atiba talked about it in the last hour. We have to vote. Each and every one of us must take the responsibility. We must do our part. And so we are the ones we are waiting on. Jesse, I think you're muted.
Johnny, how does China respond to the people of the world or to the U.S. Versus the U.S. government? How should we view in this moment? Because as Dr. King sought to identify with poor people around the world in Vietnam, or to even identify with the common humanity of sub-Saharan Africans, or with the vast majority of people in the world, the Chinese and others who have a level of hegemony in the global economy, I'm thinking in this moment that they would be calling Dr. King a communist and everything else for fighting for the common humanity of people who are struggling. And I do want to pivot this question because of your global involvement, your global significance, and what you have traveled and seen yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's an accident that the globe at this hour, at a time when we're cutting funding to NIH, to the Centers for Disease Control, that out of Africa itself is now emerging a plague that is forcing the first and developing world to slow down and to reflect upon the role that we play with our science in helping provide security for people, not only in the United States, but around the world. In a real sense, our agencies on the ground in Africa have been a first line of defense for the spread of global plagues that have consequences for humanity itself. No known cure for Ebola.
You know, Jesse, toward the end of the last century, we saw the fall of the Berlin Wall. At that time, the United States was uniquely in a position to be the preeminent hegemon, as we call it, the master of the universe, so to speak. It held a position unmatched and unchallenged by any other nation state. You started your question with China. And what we find now, 30, 40 years later, that China is one of the, well, arguably the second most dominant nation state on the globe. Its significance is quite bothersome, it seems to me, in many ways. Certainly to what the United States would like to be and do regarding, the trajectory of the global structure. I remember recently reading something. No, actually, I think it was an interview with Alika Dangote, when asked who or what nation was the most significant outside of the African continent in terms of its growth, its development, and its future. And he said, without question, it's China. And so when we talk about isolationism, as we did before the break, and what Trump is doing, China will play a significant role moving forward. Question is, how do we respond to it? How those of us who do not share in the expansionism, as we discussed before the break, how do we respond to the impact as a global polity, for example, when we think about the African diaspora, a global polity, if we can use that term, how does it respond to this struggle between nations and the current and future structure of world order? It's a very big question that we should not ignore. We should understand it, and we should have a position on it. We should respond to it. I hope that approach is answering your question, Jesse, because it's a very important one.
I certainly hope we respond to it as good neighbors. I'm sitting here this moment listening to you, and I'm thinking about the image of God, and if we're all children of God, when I think about the percentage of Chinese people that live in the world, the people of China, and I look at 1/8 of the world being of African descent, and we think about nearly 1/3 of the world, maybe half of the people of the world are Chinese or some significant number like that, that God is at least 1/8 African and maybe 3/4 Chinese. And any illusion that we see of what the image of God is, if all of humanity is created in God's image, we need to have a good neighbor policy with just about everybody, because the image of God is constantly changing with the demographics of the world. I mean, if his or her or the spirit energy's face is presenting itself, it is presenting itself in the form of an ever expanding humanity that we have an obligation to look at, to work with, not to proselytize, not to impose our own feelings or belief upon them, whether they are believers or non-believers. It seems to me that we have an obligation to respect in the world house each and every citizen that exists therein, and value who they are under whatever we believe is a creator, is God, is the spirit energy that directs human history. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Our very special guest regularly on Thursdays is Dr. Johnny Mack. I know that when we come forward in a moment, Johnny, we'll try and pick up on some of these questions. I do want to ask how we can support your work, but I also want to ask the question as to whether or not our movements and marches today, are they as effective as they were in the very truncated period, let's say roughly from the death of Emmett Till to the assassination of Malcolm and Martin. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on KBLA Talk 1580. More when we come forward, right here on KBLA.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Amber Payton with BIN News Now. Tony Carruthers, who is Black, avoided execution in Tennessee Thursday for 3 1994 kidnappings and murders after prison officials could not find a vein for lethal injection.
That same man said something to the effect of, "What's the pain like?"
Tennessee Governor Bill Lee has granted a 1-year reprieve for the execution. The Democratic National Committee's 2024 autopsy is now public. The nearly 200-page report written by Democratic strategist Paul Rivera says former President Joe Biden's campaign and White House failed to set up former Vice President Kamala Harris for success. The report also says Harris struggled to define herself and President Trump, though replacing Biden with Harris helped other Democrats win. And Americans returning from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Uganda, or South Sudan must now enter the U.S. through Washington Dulles for enhanced screening due to rising Ebola concerns. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
PCH is open. Take the 101 freeway to Canaan Road. Malibu is open for business. Enjoy a scenic drive through the mountains and return to the beautiful beach. A beach day is always a better day. It's open and waiting for you.
Sponsored by Recreation Alliance.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Dodgers have the day off today. They start a 3-game series in Milwaukee Friday night. The Dodgers lead the San Diego Padres by a 1.5 games in the NL West. The NBA Western Conference Finals moves to San Antonio for games 3 and 4. Game 3 is in San Antonio Friday night, 5:30 tip-off on NBC. For you streamers out there, you can catch the game live on Peacock. San Antonio and Oklahoma City are tied at 1-1 in the best of 7. Got a few inquiries from my report this morning on the revenue HBCU football teams will earn in the 2026 season for playing teams in the Power 4 conferences. HBCU teams will earn a combined $6.9 million in gate revenues from the 15 games. I was asked, what's the highest single game payout given to an HBCU team for a football game? The answer is $1 million. That's what Ohio State gave Grambling last season for their September 6th game in Columbus. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Every day on KBLA Talk 1580, it's like a live town hall meeting over the airwaves. Politics, culture, community, justice, nothing is off the table. We take more listener calls, spark more honest conversations, and challenge more assumptions than any talk station in Southern California. Because good ideas matter more than ideology. KBLA Talk 1580, your station, your voice, your city. Listen live at KBLA 1580 AM on our free KBLA 1580 app or on our website at KBLA1580.com.
Unapologetically progressive.
Let's be real. For too long, too many of our students have sat in overcrowded classrooms in underfunded public schools.
But as head of the San Diego School Board, Richard Barrera changed that.
Under Barrera's leadership, student literacy rose from the state average all the way to #1 among major urban school districts. Barrera led the way for smaller classrooms and for teachers to be paid what they're worth.
Barrera funded more counselors and mental health services, and community schools that teach real-world skills for future jobs.
A community organizer who became an education leader to fight for our kids. The only candidate for State Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Backed by the 310,000 classroom educators of the California Teachers Association. Vote Democrat Richard Barrera for State Superintendent.
Ad paid for by California Teachers Association Independent Expenditure Committee, not authorized by a candidate or committee controlled by a candidate.
Every voice matters, especially the ones they told to be quiet. This is KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 is connecting you with services and solutions. Domestic violence and family violence is when someone in an intimate or family relationship tries to gain or maintain power and control over another through a wide range of abusive behaviors. Every single act may amount to abuse. Abuse can take on various forms: psychological and emotional, physical and economic, and sexual abuse. The Genesee Center Incorporated is a nationally recognized nonprofit domestic violence prevention and intervention organization, housing women and children from 30 days up to 2 years through emergency and transitional shelters. The Genesee Center also provides support services like mental health counseling, life skills classes, computer training, job referrals for children, field trips, tutoring, and comprehensive direct legal services. If you need help or you'd like to donate or volunteer, call the Genesee Hotline, 1-800-479-7328. That's 1-800-479-7328, or visit genesee.org. Everyone has the right to be safe. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
The Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. 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 King Volley, drop the beat. Come on and talk with me. Come on and listen to me. Come on and talk with me. Come on and listen to me. KBLA Talk 15.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on KBLA Talk 1580. We are in Thought-Provoking Thursdays. We're in the World House with Dr. Johnny Mack. But tomorrow is a new milestone for the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. We are testing out the technology on KBLA Talk 1580 for those of you in Los Angeles, around the country, and around the world to call in to our 1-800 number. That number is 833-SHOW-JJJ, 833-746-9555, 833-746-9555. I want to have an interactive program so we can take questions from callers, put up our best arguments, ask our questions. But I need to test the technology before we move it to other hours on the program. And Fridays are always the best opportunity to do that. I hope those of you who can hear my voice are willing to join us in our test tomorrow right here at KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., and I'm grateful, tremendously grateful for this opportunity. But I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to hear from those of you on the ground in large measure, because this is our 5th anniversary here at KBLA, our 2nd anniversary on the show. And I'm really, really honored to engage directly and things that we don't know, hear from other people, things that they might share. Dr. Johnny Mack is our very special guest in this hour. He's a social entrepreneur, a scholar practitioner with expertise in subject areas of peace, conflict, and social change and movements. He is one of the advisors to the Reverend Al Sharpton. He's certainly an advisor to me and certainly an advisor to the late Reverend Jesse Jackson on international affairs issues. And I'm so grateful to have known Johnny Mack for these many years and grateful that he is a regular contributor to our program right here at KBLA. Johnny, welcome forward to the show.
Jesse, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Johnny, can you share with us how we can support your work?
Our website, Jesse, is theworldhouseproject.org. Again, theworldhouseproject.org. And you can find out about our work at that website, and you can also make a tax-deductible contribution. Thank you for asking.
Johnny, I'm particularly honored and look forward to encouraging our supporters to support your work. I'm so proud also of Barbara Arnwine at the Transformative Justice Coalition for the work that she has done and the timing with which she puts together marches, including but not limited to the march that just took place in Alabama after the Supreme Court decision to remove the Shamari Figures congressional district in that state, and the work that she has been doing in terms of direct engagement through the No Kings efforts as they continue to grow and fight tyranny across our country. But Johnny Mack is a very vital part of the thinking that goes into powering a movement, and I'm grateful for that. Johnny, there have been questions raised about the effectiveness of our marches, and comparisons have been offered to the marches of the 60s, which have become near mythical in terms of their proportion. As you know, the March on Washington in 1963 was a march for jobs and justice. The economy was front and center. Of course, Martin Luther King Jr. delivered the I Have a Dream speech at that march, and somehow we don't refer to it as the Jobs and Justice March. We refer to it as the I Have a Dream March. But when you think about the Freedom Riders, when you think about crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, when you think about the march from Selma to Montgomery, you think about nonviolent confrontation. There's a confrontation. Today we have a lot of speeches. Everybody got to give a speech. Everybody got to go live. Everybody got to post a picture. I was here. I get all of that. But there was a confrontation. And then we did not have the support of the state police or the Capitol Police or the security leading members of Congress to our marches. Dr. King talked about a group of creative, non-conforming witnesses to our struggle who helped shape the character, the culture, and the narrative of our movement in nonviolent ways. And in those marches, Johnny, they had to be trained. From your perspective, what's the difference between our millions of people that we have marching and the few nonconformists who actually changed the law in the 1960s?
Well, Jesse, while the principles may be eternal, we might call them eternal verities, eternal truths, eternal values, the fundamental principles of nonviolence. In practice, how we apply those principles change. They change with the times. They change under circumstances. One wonders, for example, if the Homeland Security Act that we are confronted with today that creates much of the infrastructure of border security, of ICE, brought us the current internal and external policing that we realize today. Had that act been in place in the mid-20th century, one wonders what the success of the nonviolent movement might be. There's a book written by Erica Chenoweth and Maria Stefan in 2012. I think it's called Why Civil Resistance Works. I think it is. And part of that work suggests that from 2000 to 2006, 53% of all nonviolent movements were successful. And Chenoweth argues that if don't miss this now, if 3.5%, it's called the 3.5% rule, Jesse. Her research says that if 3.5% of a population joins a protest movement, its likelihood for success is great. That's very important. I think
0.35% of a percentage?
3.5, not 0.35.
Oh, 3.5.
It requires, at least in her work, which is quite extensive, but her work also suggests that in today's current authoritarian environment, both here in the United States and throughout the globe, there's a significant shift. So, Jesse, in other words, in the same way that social movements have shifted from the mid-20th century to where we are today, so has the infrastructure that has been put in place to either accommodate or frustrate the efforts of nonviolent movements. Now, King understood this. He understood and saw, I believe, these changes as they were emerging, which is why he argued that we must put in the effort of really understanding how nonviolence works, not merely nonviolence resistance, but the entire panoply of what's available to social movements in order to effect nonviolent social change. That's why in my own work, I asked the question, after confrontation, then what? What do we do if after all of the confrontation, all of the protesting, the marching, the civil resistance, and we don't achieve what we sought, what then do we do? Or, Jesse, if we do achieve it, but what replaces what we fought against is worse than what we have, what then do we do? And that's actually where we are today.
Johnny, I'd make the argument that so much of the thesis that we posited is what took place between Brown and the death of Martin Luther King Jr. And of course, the eruption at the hearing and notification of his assassination on April 4th, 1968. That what took place in Tiananmen Square with the young man who stood in front of the tank was a manifestation of our movement. It spoke to resistance and the human spirit and its capacity. Just one man standing in front of a tank. And the image of that one man, an act of defiance, was globally, I think it's a Pulitzer Prize winning photo, the consequences of that moment of resistance. Since 1968, Mandela had spent 27 years in jail. That act of defiance that gave birth to the democracy that is South Africa under the leadership of Cyril Ramaphosa, we are responsible for that too. I mean, Mandela emerged from prison saying that he had observed and read about the American civil rights movement, and it changed his attitude and disposition about what was possible. This idea of multicultural living and coming together with even Afrikaners. There's so much to be said about how our movement has influenced others. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. When we come back on KBLA Talk 1580, we will be with Johnny Mack right here on the World House.
While you're stuck in traffic, we can at least bring you up to speed on the news of the day. You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. only on KBLA Talk 1580.
My name is Cynthia Mitchell. I've been an emergency room nurse in Los Angeles County for 25 years. I've been there through every fire season, every outbreak, every earthquake. Every time Los Angeles needed us, the doctors and nurses of Los Angeles County showed up. And right now, I'm seeing another disaster coming. Trump's cuts to Los Angeles County's healthcare system are a public health crisis in the making. Medi-Cal, public hospitals, disaster preparedness are all at risk, but we can stop it. Measure ER fights back against these cuts. For a half a penny, we keep emergency rooms open, care within reach for working families, and doctors and nurses serving the communities we love. When you vote yes on Measure ER, you're not just voting for health care, you're voting for LA. Vote yes on Measure ER by June 2nd.
Ad paid for by Yes on ER, Restore Healthcare for Angelinos, sponsored by St. John's Community Health and Health Justice Action Fund. Ad committee top funder, St. John's Community Health.
Going to a World Cup match in LA this summer? Ditch the parking stress and ride Metro. With direct service from across LA County, it's the easy way to get there for just $1.75 each way.
Let's be real. For too long, too many of our students have sat in overcrowded classrooms in underfunded public schools.
But as head of the San Diego School Board, Richard Barrera changed that.
Under Barrera's leadership, student literacy rose from the state average all the way to #1 among major urban school districts. Barrera led the way for smaller classrooms and for teachers to be paid what they're worth.
Barrera funded more counselors and mental health services, and community schools that teach real-world skills for future jobs.
A community organizer who became an education leader to fight for our kids. The only candidate for State Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Backed by the 310,000 classroom educators of the California Teachers Association. Vote Democrat Richard Barrera for State Superintendent.
Ad paid for by California Teachers Association Independent Expenditure Committee. Not authorized by a candidate or committee controlled by a candidate.
From the people who brought you It's the Dog Park comes.
It's a hot spot on your dog's leg that the internet says you can treat it at home. You're not sure though, because now it's oozing.
Protect your dog from injury and illness with Progressive Pet Insurance.
Ooh, he's licking it. Super gross, dude.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Coverage subject to policy terms.
I'm Chuck McDowell, founder of Wesley Financial Group. Did you buy a timeshare because they told you it was a great investment? That's a lie. Most timeshares can be bought online for $1. To find out what your timeshare is worth and to cancel it, call us today and we'll send you our timeshare exit kit free with all your options for cancellation.
Call Wesley for your free exit info guide. 800-798-3399. That's 800-798-3399.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
The Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. 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 King Volley, drop the beat. Come on and talk with me. Come on and listen to me. Come on and talk with me. Come on and listen to me. KBLA Talk 1580. Download.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on KBLA Talk 1580. We are in the World House with Dr. Johnny Mack. He is a mentor exemplar. And I'm so grateful that weekly he gives us an hour of his time. And I can't begin to tell you when I first decided to undertake a career in radio how difficult it was to try and convince Johnny to come do this with me for an hour every week. And he has been dedicated and consistent. I'm so very grateful for the tutelage that he provides me and all of our listeners through these very difficult times. Johnny, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
You're too kind, Jesse. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
I'm only telling the truth. Hey, Johnny, check this out. Dr. Mack, I'm wondering if it's fair to assume that while we are watching these pillars of the civil rights movement be dismantled by the court and by this president, from diversity, equity, and inclusion to affirmative action, to his attack on the PWIs, suggesting that we were not qualified when we were allowed to go to medical school and to law schools at their schools. I'm struggling with this idea that Dr. King's work, from Rosa Parks to his untimely assassination, murder, and death, was about removing the last vestiges of Jim Crow at the beginning of Second Reconstruction. And I define the beginning of Second Reconstruction to be 1954 forward. We had to have a constitutional framework to do what we did and to witness what we've become. But the vestiges of Jim Crow still lingered, and Dr. King, Malcolm X, and others rose to that occasion. They rose to that moment because the America that we live in, well, let's just say a year ago, was fundamentally different than anything I think they might have imagined or even experienced in their own lives. As Jim Crow comes to an end, there is an even deeper reflection, Johnny, at the end of first Reconstruction. As second Reconstruction comes to an end, there's an even deeper reflection and comparison about how we lost all of our members of Congress, our rights coming out of first Reconstruction, and the parallels that are being made to that reality today, which has called many of us to suggest that organizations like the NAACP, the Urban League, the fraternities and sororities that were founded at the beginning of Jim Crow, that they too should return to their roots of resistance. After confrontation, then what? A return to the roots of our resistance, and quite frankly, away from the social clubs and some of the foolishness that we've engaged in since we've enjoyed a level of comfort in an ever constant and changing reality. Johnny Mac?
Yeah. So, Jesse, resistance will always be necessary. When you question whether the legacy organizations, I suppose we can use that term, should return to their roots of resistance, the question is, what are those roots, and when did they leave them, and why did they leave them? But the point really is that resistance, whatever it is and however it is done, must be consistent with the circumstances in real time as well as over time. And I think, Jesse, that resistance has to be matched with, as I've said many times on this show and otherwise, with other forms of nonviolent social action. But also, we must remember that King argued that those legacy organizations came together at a time and addressed issues consistent with that time. But he told us that those same organizations would not be the ones to finish the work, my term, not his, but would not be the same ones to meet the challenges of the difficult days ahead. And so if he was right, that's not to suggest that these organizations should not be in the fight, should not be in the struggle, but what else? What other methods, what other types of organizations should we be focused on today in order to address the challenges and the circumstances that we have today? That is a question that King put to us that, Jesse, I'm not sure we've answered yet. And it may well be, and I argue it is, why we're in the predicament we are in today, that we did not do the kind of study and reflection, and we don't have the full understanding of nonviolent social change that King admonished us we should focus on in order to be ready for this time and under these circumstances.
Johnny, we were 3 years. We were 3 years into the right to vote when Dr. King was assassinated. 1965, assassinated 1968. He'd never lived to see 62 blacks in Congress. He never lived to see 800 African-American state legislators at the state level fighting for justice with respect to these lines that the legislation he helped advance, helped create. He never lived to see blacks in the Senate in second Reconstruction. That's a new thing. That just happened. He certainly never lived to see Barack Obama as president of the United States. And so, yes, these are changing times. But Johnny, in a real sense, even in these changing times, there is some ancestral call to the ways in which we've made it over And in that reflection, Johnny, paying homage to that period, can you offer us a word of hope?
Well, as I've said before, and I will always say, my hope is in the generation, this new generation, and that new generation that continually emerges from one to the next. We, Jesse, you and I, have stood and are standing on the shoulders of those who came before us, who stood on the shoulders that came before them. Now, our shoulders must be broad enough, and we must be determined enough to allow those who follow us to stand on our shoulders and enable them. And it is they in whom I hope.
So grateful, Johnny. Johnny, I was talking with Barbara Arnwine after the Alabama march, and she said of the thousands of people that showed up, she said, Jesse, the largest number demographically were somewhere between the ages of 18 and 25. I think she might have even said 30 or 32. She said she was overwhelmed by the generation of activists who had shown up at that particular march. And obviously, on one side of town, the No Kings marches are taking place. But now with the direct assault on our Voting Rights Act, including the new tools that we have. I've seen some preachers preaching some amazing sermons right through here about the injustices that are taking place. And then I can't help but reflect, even though this wasn't my era, when Joseph Jackson was the president of the National Baptist Convention, and the idea of talking about, justice in the here and now was fraught against those ministers who preached the by and by every Sunday.
Yes.
They weren't willing to make that transition. But increasingly, boy, these preachers from these seminaries up at Princeton Theological Seminary and Chicago Theological Seminary and Crozier and Union Theological Seminary. I mean, these preachers are coming out here and they are speaking real truth to power. And all I've asked in this particular space, that as we march, that we look at the drama associated with the nonviolent confrontation. A lot of people out here marching. Not everybody's willing to go to jail or get hit in the head with a club. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Grateful to Johnny Mack. More on KBLA Talk 1580 on Friday. It's Fat Meat right here with Jesse Jackson.